The mansion stood tall and proud at the edge of the city, with wide marble steps and glass windows that reflected the sun like shining mirrors. Inside this house lived a man of great wealth, a man who was used to comfort, silence, and order. He was a millionaire, busy with business, busy with deals, but in the middle of his world of money and power, there was only one treasure that truly mattered to him: his little boy. The boy was 7 years old, full of laughter and endless questions. He loved toy cars, climbing trees, and asking why the sky was blue. He was curious, innocent, and the center of his father's heart. But because the millionaire's life was filled with meetings and travels, the boy's daily care did not always come from him. Instead, it came from someone else, someone who was not family by blood but family by love. She was the nanny, a young woman with kind eyes and a calm voice. She had been hired years ago, but over time she became more than just an employee. She became the one the boy trusted, the one who tucked him into bed, who wiped his tears, who celebrated his little victories every morning. The nanny would walk him to the garden where birds sang from the tall trees. She told him stories while he played, stories about heroes and courage, about kindness and love. Sometimes the boy laughed so hard that even the servants passing by would smile without knowing why. In the evenings, when the millionaire returned from work, he would often see his son resting peacefully in the nanny's lap, a storybook open beside them. And for a moment he would feel comfort. He may not always say it, but deep inside he knew that the nanny was the reason his son's childhood felt warm and safe. The staff of the house respected her too. They saw how patient she was, how she treated the boy not like a duty but like her own child. If the boy was sick, she stayed awake by his side. If he was sad, she found a way to make him laugh. Her devotion was silent, steady, and strong, and though she lived a simple life in the shadow of wealth, her heart shone brighter than the grand chandeliers above the dining hall. That day began like any other. The boy woke up early, running through the hallways with his small footsteps echoing against the marble floors. He was chasing his toy plane, giggling, while the nanny followed with a smile. She reminded him to eat his breakfast, to finish his glass of milk, and he made funny faces as he tried to avoid it. She laughed softly, pretending to be stern, until he finally gave in. It was an ordinary morning. The kind people often forget. The kind people do not realize they will later remember forever. The millionaire left for his business meeting, kissing his son on the forehead. He promised to bring back a new toy car. The boy waved goodbye, not knowing that this simple goodbye was just moments away from being shadowed by fear. The nanny tidied the living room, helped the boy with his schoolwork, and prepared him for a nap in the afternoon. Outside, the sky was calm, the air warm, everything peaceful. No one could have imagined that danger was already hiding in the walls of the grand house, waiting for its moment. The boy lay in his room upstairs, his toys spread out beside him. His eyelids grew heavy and soon he was asleep. The nanny checked on him, gently pulling the blanket over his small body. She stood by the window for a moment, looking out at the garden. Perhaps she thought about her own life, her family far away, the little siblings she supported with the money she earned. She never complained, never asked for more. Her heart was content knowing that she was making a difference in one child's life. The house was quiet, too quiet. Only the soft hum of the air conditioning and the ticking of a golden clock in the hallway. It was the calm before the storm, the kind of calm that makes the coming danger even more terrifying. In that silence, no one knew how fast everything was about to change. The ordinary morning was about to be remembered forever, not for its laughter, but for the fire that would turn it into a story of courage. The millionaire, far from home, had no idea that his wealth, his beautiful mansion, and even his carefully guarded life would mean nothing in the next few hours. Only one thing would matter: the bond between a brave woman and a little boy who trusted her with his whole heart. And as the boy slept peacefully, unaware of the smoke that would soon rise, the nanny remained nearby, ready in ways she herself did not yet know, ready to face the fire, ready to prove that love is stronger than fear, stronger than flames, stronger than anything money can ever buy. The afternoon sun fell gently across the wide roof of the mansion, making the glass windows shine like jewels. The boy was still upstairs, dreaming in his small world of toys and stories. The nanny was nearby, folding some of his clothes and humming softly to herself. She felt safe. She had no reason to expect anything unusual. But danger does not always give a warning. Sometimes it enters silently, then explodes without mercy. It started with a faint smell. At first, the nanny thought it was maybe from the kitchen. Perhaps the cook had left something too long on the stove. But the smell grew sharper, thicker, like burning wood. She frowned, her heart beginning to beat faster. She moved toward the hallway and saw it. Thin smoke sliding across the ceiling. Dark and curling. Her breath caught. The mansion, so proud and strong, was not safe anymore. It was turning into a trap. Downstairs, a servant shouted, "Fire! Fire!" The voice echoed through the wide halls. The alarms began to scream, red lights blinking. Suddenly, the peaceful house was filled with chaos. Furniture seemed to blur as staff rushed to find safety. Some ran toward the front door. Others tried to grab important things, papers, jewelry, anything they thought mattered. But in that moment, the only thing that truly mattered was a 7-year-old boy sleeping in his bed. The fire spread quickly, faster than anyone could have imagined. Curtains caught first, flames climbing upward like angry claws. The smoke grew heavy, rolling down the staircases, making every step a battlefield. The air turned hot, dry, painful to breathe. It was as if the house itself was being swallowed alive. The nanny's mind raced. She thought of only one thing, the boy. She rushed back into his room. Her hands shook as she opened the door and saw him lying there, still asleep, innocent, unaware that death was already moving closer. For a moment she froze because behind her, the hallway filled with smoke so thick she could barely see. But she did not allow fear to stop her. She moved to the boy, knelt beside him, and shook him gently. "Wake up. Darling," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to go." The boy opened his eyes slowly. Confused, he coughed as the smoke reached him. He saw fear in the nanny's eyes and clung to her arm. She picked him up, pressing his small body close to her chest. His heartbeat was fast against hers. She could feel his tiny hands gripping her tightly. And with that, she turned toward the door. The hallway was already burning. Flames licked the wooden railing, and the once shiny walls were black with smoke. Heat pressed against her skin. She covered the boy's face with her scarf to protect him from the smoke. Every step was a battle. Every breath burned her lungs. But she forced herself forward. Downstairs, servants shouted. Some cried out to her not to go that way. They begged her to wait for the firefighters. But she knew the truth. The fire was moving too quickly. If she waited, the boy would not survive. She could not gamble with his life. She could not gamble with the trust his father had placed in her. Her own safety did not matter anymore. The fire roared louder like a beast awakened. The chandelier above the staircase cracked and fell with a crash. Glass and fire scattered everywhere. The nanny shielded the boy with her arms. Bending her body over him, a small cut opened on her shoulder. But she did not stop. She pushed forward, her feet searching for ground between broken pieces. Her only thought was, I must save him, I must get him out. The boy began to cry softly into her chest. His tears mixed with the soot on her blouse. She whispered to him, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." "I won't leave you." Her words were shaky, but they gave him courage. He nodded against her. Even as his small body trembled, the smoke grew darker, choking, making it hard to see anything beyond a few steps. The nanny felt her head grow light, but she fought against it. Her love for the child gave her strength. She remembered all the times she had held his hand when he was sick, all the times he had laughed because of her stories. She could not let those memories end in flames. Every corner seemed blocked. The main staircase was burning. The back hallway was filled with smoke. Panic tried to creep into her heart. But she forced it back, she told herself. There has to be a way. There has to be a way out. She looked at the window, tall and framed with curtains now half burned. It was dangerous, but it was their only hope. She staggered to the window, pushing it open. Fresh air rushed in, cool compared to the suffocating heat inside. The boy gasped for breath. She held him tighter. Knowing the next step would be even harder, flames snapped behind her. Smoke filled the room like a dark sea. There was no time to wait. The house was no longer a home, it was a cage of fire. And in that terrible moment, the nanny made her choice. She pressed the boy's face into her shoulder, whispered a prayer, and prepared to risk everything. The house groaned under the weight of destruction, and outside faintly the sound of sirens began to rise. But inside it was only her, the boy, and the fire. A race between life and death. The flames grew louder, like a storm that refused to end. The nanny stood at the window, holding the boy tightly against her chest. His little arms wrapped around her neck, his face buried into her shoulder. The world outside seemed so close. Yet the distance between safety and death felt endless. She knew she had only seconds to decide. Every choice mattered, and one wrong step could cost both of them their lives. Down below, the servants and guards shouted for help. Some held out their arms, others ran to find blankets, ladders, anything to catch them if they jumped. But the nanny's eyes moved back to the boy. His tears stained her blouse. His voice shook as he whispered, "I'm scared." Her heart clenched. She stroked his hair quickly, whispering, "I know, my darling, but I'm here. And I won't let anything happen to you." Behind her, the fire roared, angry and wild. The heat pushed against her back like a giant hand. She had no more time. She had to move. She had to choose. She turned from the window, searching desperately for another way. Her mind raced. Staircase was gone. Hallway was blocked. The only path left was through the fire itself. For a moment she froze. Her body trembled, not from weakness but from fear of failing the boy. But then something inside her grew strong. She remembered all the moments they had shared, the times he held her hand when he felt lonely, the way he laughed when she told stories, the way he looked at her like she was his protector. In his eyes, she was not just a nanny. She was safety itself. How could she let him down now? She pulled the boy closer and turned back toward the flames. The smoke burned her throat. Her lungs ached. Every step forward felt like walking into death. But she forced herself to move step by step, shielding the boy with her arms. The fire reached for them, snapping, cracking. Throwing sparks into her hair, she brushed them away with her free hand and kept going. Downstairs, voices shouted her name. They begged her to stop, begged her to wait. But she did not listen. She could not listen. The boy's life was worth more than her own. Every part of her screamed to protect him. The boy clung tighter, his small voice crying. "Don't let go," she whispered back, coughing. "Never. I'll never let go of you." Her words were broken by smoke, but they carried strength, enough for him to believe, enough for him to hold on. Suddenly, a beam above them cracked and fell. She stumbled, nearly falling, but twisted her body to shield the child. The wood scraped her arm, leaving a burn. She cried out in pain but never loosened her hold on him. The boy's sobs grew louder, and she pressed a quick kiss to his forehead, whispering again, "We're almost out, just a little more. Trust me." Every step became slower, harder. The smoke blinded her eyes until she could see almost nothing. She followed the faint memory of the house's layout, counting her steps, praying that she was going the right way. Her body felt heavy, her knees weak, but her spirit refused to stop. The boy's heartbeat against her chest reminded her why she had no choice. At last she reached the end of the hallway, where the flames thinned just enough to see a faint glow of daylight. It was another window, cracked open slightly. Her heart leapt. It was their chance. She stumbled forward, her legs giving everything they had left. She kicked the window hard and the glass shattered outward. A rush of fresh air filled the room, giving them one final breath of hope. Below the window, people were gathered, their faces pale with fear and hope. Some held blankets, stretching them wide. Their voices rose together, shouting, "Jump! We'll catch you." The nanny leaned out, coughing. Her arms tightened around the boy. She whispered softly into his ear, "Close your eyes, my darling. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you." He buried his face deeper against her, trusting her completely. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the voices below. She took one deep breath of smoky air, closed her eyes and leapt. The world seemed to freeze. For a second it felt like flying. The boy's small body pressed tightly to hers, her arms wrapped around him like a shield. Then came the rush of wind, the sound of voices crying out, and finally, the hard but saving embrace of the blankets below. They landed with a heavy thud, rolling across the ground. The nanny cried out as pain shot through her arm and leg. But her first thought was the boy. She opened her eyes and looked at him. He was alive, he was crying, but he was safe. She hugged him tight, tears mixing with soot on her face. Around them, servants rushed forward. Some tried to help her up, others checked the boy. Everyone's faces were filled with shock and awe. They had all seen what she had done. They had all seen the moment she chose to risk everything for the child. The mansion still burned behind them, flames devouring the walls and roof. But for the nanny, none of it mattered. She only cared that the boy in her arms was breathing. His small voice whispered through tears, "You saved me." And she answered, voice trembling but strong, "I always will." The nanny's body ached as she lay on the ground, clutching the boy tightly against her chest. People surrounded them, voices mixed with panic and relief. Some tried to pull her up, others shouted for water, and somewhere in the distance the sound of sirens grew louder. The fire had already eaten through half the mansion, flames rising high into the sky like a terrible monster. The boy cried in her arms, his cheeks streaked with soot and tears. She kissed his forehead, whispering, "It's all right now. You're safe." But even as she said the words, she knew it was not over. The fire had not been beaten. It still roared inside the house, threatening to take everything. She looked around and realized not everyone had escaped. A maid screamed for her sister who was trapped inside. A guard shouted that some of the staff might still be upstairs. The nanny's chest tightened. She had done the impossible once already, but her heart told her the fight was not finished. She placed the boy gently in the arms of a servant. "Don't let go of him," she ordered firmly. Her voice, though weak, carried strength. The boy's small hands reached out to her. "Don't leave me," he cried. His eyes were wide with fear, but the nanny cupped his face and whispered, "I have to help them, my darling. I will come back to you." "I promise." She kissed his cheek, and though it broke her heart, she turned away. The heat hit her again as she ran back toward the house. The servants shouted, "No! Don't go back in!" But she did not stop. Smoke poured from the windows, and the wooden beams groaned as if the house was alive in its suffering. She covered her mouth with her arm and pushed through the front door. The air was heavy, thick, and painful to breathe. Every step forward was like walking into the jaws of death. The staircase was gone, reduced to burning pieces, so she moved along the side hallway. Flames crawled across the walls. Snapping at her clothes, the smoke stung her eyes. Blinding her still, she pressed on, shouting for anyone to answer. "Is anyone here? Can you hear me?" Her voice echoed, swallowed quickly by the roar of fire. From above, a faint cry reached her ears. Her heart leapt. Someone was still alive. She pushed forward, searching for another way up. Her eyes found a narrow service staircase at the back of the hall. It was already half burned, but it was her only chance. She gripped the rail and began to climb. The wood creaked dangerously under her weight. Flames licked at her feet, but she did not stop. She pulled herself higher, coughing so hard she thought her lungs would burst. At the top, she found a maid curled in the corner. Her face streaked with ash. Her leg was trapped under a fallen beam. The maid's eyes widened in shock when she saw the nanny. "Leave me. Save yourself," the maid cried. But the nanny shook her head fiercely. "No, I will not leave you." She dropped to her knees. Ignoring the fire snapping at her back, she pushed against the heavy beam. Her muscles trembling, it refused to move. Her strength was fading, but then she remembered the boy's face. His tiny voice begging her not to leave him. That memory gave her power. She cried out and pushed harder, finally moving the beam enough for the maid to pull free. The maid fell into her arms, coughing and crying. The nanny dragged her up, half carrying her toward the staircase. The flames chased them, hungry and fast. The staircase cracked beneath their feet, but they stumbled down, barely holding on. At one point, the maid slipped, nearly falling, but the nanny pulled her back, refusing to let go. Together they reached the bottom, gasping for breath. Outside, voices rose in shock when they saw the nanny stumble out of the burning house with the maid leaning on her shoulder. People rushed forward, grabbing the maid, pulling her to safety. The nanny collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving. Her clothes were torn, her arms burned, but she looked only toward the boy. He was there, still safe, still waiting. His eyes filled with tears of relief when he saw her. He ran to her, throwing his arms around her neck. She hugged him tightly, closing her eyes for a moment as if the whole world had disappeared. But even then, the fire still raged. The mansion groaned like it was about to collapse. Firefighters rushed onto the scene, pulling hoses, shouting orders. The millionaire's proud house was falling apart piece by piece. The nanny held the boy close, her body shaking, but her spirit strong. She had faced the inferno not once, but twice, and returned with life. The people around her looked at her with awe. They whispered about her courage. They saw more than a nanny. They saw a hero. She did not think of herself that way. She thought only of the boy, the child she had promised to protect. She kissed his hair, whispering softly, "It's over now, you're safe, I'm here." But in her heart, she knew the fire had changed everything. Nothing would ever be the same again. The night air was filled with smoke and the bitter smell of burning wood. The once grand mansion crackled as flames tore through its walls. Firefighters shouted as they fought to control the blaze. Their hoses sprayed water that turned to steam the moment it touched the fire. Crowds of neighbors gathered at a distance, their eyes wide as they watched the proud house collapse piece by piece. But in the middle of all this chaos, the nanny sat on the ground, the boy still clinging to her chest. Her clothes were dark with soot, her skin burned in patches, her hands shook from exhaustion, yet she did not let go of him. Every time someone tried to move the boy away, he cried, his arms tightening around her neck. He did not care about the mansion, about the fire, about the shouting all around. All he cared about was her, the woman who had carried him through the flames. The nanny's body screamed with pain. Her breathing was rough, and every inhale felt like fire inside her chest. Her arms ached as if they could no longer hold the child, but still she held on. She looked down at his frightened face and forced a weak smile. "See, we made it," she whispered. "You're safe." But just as she thought the danger was over, a terrible sound shook the air. It was a deep, heavy crack, louder than thunder. The roof of the mansion gave way. Crashing down in a storm of sparks and debris, people screamed and rushed back. The fire surged higher as if roaring in victory. The boy buried his face in her shoulder and cried. She shielded him again, even though they were far from the falling roof. It was instinct, her first thought always to protect him. No matter the cost, a firefighter rushed toward them. "She's hurt," he shouted, kneeling beside her. He tried to lift her arm, but she winced in pain. Her skin was blistered and her ankle was swollen from the fall during the escape. Yet when they tried to take the boy from her arms, she shook her head firmly. "No, he stays with me," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse but full of strength. The boy clung even tighter, refusing to let go. The firefighters exchanged glances but respected her will. They began treating her burns with wet cloths. Another covered the boy in a blanket, but still he did not move from her lap around them. The fire continued to eat away at the mansion. The millionaire's fortune, built into walls of marble and wood, was being destroyed in front of everyone. But in that moment, wealth meant nothing. What mattered most was sitting on the ground in the arms of a woman who had risked her life without hesitation. As the firefighters battled the last of the flames, the nanny's strength began to fade. She leaned her head against the boy's hair, her eyes closing. The boy shook her gently, panic in his small voice. "Don't sleep. Please don't sleep." She opened her eyes again, forcing herself to stay awake. "I'm here," she whispered. "I promised I won't leave you." The ambulance finally arrived, flashing red and white lights across the dark night. Paramedics rushed forward with stretchers. They lifted the maid she had saved earlier, then turned to her. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. They caught her, laying her gently on the stretcher. The boy cried out, "No! Don't take her!" He reached for her and she reached back, their hands clasping tightly. "It's all right," she told him softly. "I'll be right here." The paramedics looked at each other, then allowed the boy to climb onto the stretcher beside her. He lay curled against her as they carried them both into the ambulance. The doors closed, shutting out the fire and noise inside. The nanny's breath was shallow. The boy pressed his ear to her chest, listening to her heartbeat. It was slower than before, but it was there. "Steady and strong," he whispered. "You're my hero." And she smiled faintly, brushing his hair back with her trembling hand. The ambulance sped away, siren wailing, leaving behind the burning remains of the mansion. Neighbors murmured about the nanny's bravery. Firefighters shook their heads in disbelief at her courage. They all knew they had witnessed something rare that night. Someone who had chosen love over fear, sacrifice over safety, inside the ambulance. The nanny closed her eyes for a moment. Not from weakness, but from relief. The boy was alive, and that was all she wanted. The pain in her body was sharp, but the warmth of his tiny hand in hers gave her comfort. She whispered one last time before drifting into unconsciousness. "As long as you're safe, nothing else matters." And as the city lights blurred past the ambulance windows, the boy held her hand tightly, refusing to let go. His young heart understood something that even adults sometimes forget, that true courage is not found in power or money, but in the love that makes a person risk everything for someone else. The ambulance reached the hospital quickly. Nurses rushed out with stretchers, their voices sharp with urgency. The nanny was lifted down, her body weak and burned, yet her hand never left the boy's. He cried when they tried to separate them, so the nurses allowed him to stay close. His eyes were wide with fear, his small face streaked with ash. He did not care about the bright hospital lights or the doctors running around. He cared only for her. They pushed her into the emergency room, and at last the boy had to wait outside. A nurse knelt in front of him, speaking gently. "She's very brave. She will be okay." You have to be strong for her now." But the boy shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Don't let her die," he whispered, clutching the nurse's hand. The nurse's eyes softened, but she had no answer. Inside the room, doctors worked quickly. They cleaned her wounds, bandaged her burns, and gave her oxygen for the smoke she had breathed in. The nanny's body trembled with exhaustion, but her heart still fought to stay alive. Every time her eyes closed, she remembered the boy's face, his cries, his trust in her, and that memory pulled her back. She would not let go. Not yet. Meanwhile, the news spread. Reporters had gathered outside the burning mansion, and soon the story of the nanny's bravery reached the millionaire. He was in his car, rushing back from his business trip when the call came. His hands froze on the steering wheel as he heard the words, "Fire." Son trapped, Nanny saved him. His chest tightened with fear until he heard the final part. "Your son is alive." He closed his eyes for a moment, relief washing over him. But when he learned that the nanny had been badly injured, something deep inside him shifted when he arrived at the hospital. His son ran into his arms, crying, "Papa, she saved me, she went into the fire for me." The boy's voice shook as he told the story. Again and again, the millionaire hugged him tightly, his heart breaking at the thought of what could have happened. His son's life, his only treasure, had been carried through fire by a woman he had once seen as just an employee. He walked down the hospital hall, his shoes clicking against the floor, but his steps were unsteady. He had faced powerful men in boardrooms. He had controlled fortunes worth millions, yet he had never felt this kind of fear. His eyes searched until he saw her through the glass window of the emergency room. She lay pale against the white sheets, her face covered in soot, her arms wrapped in bandages. Her chest rose and fell weakly, and machines beeped around her. For a moment, he could not move. His throat tightened. He thought of all the times he had passed her in the hallway with only a polite nod. All the times he had taken her presence for granted. He thought of the boy, how happy he always seemed with her, how much love she had quietly given without asking for anything in return. And now she had nearly given her life. Not for money, not for praise, but for love. When the doctors finally allowed him to enter, he stepped inside slowly. The boy refused to leave her side. Holding her hand tightly, the millionaire sat on the other side of the bed. His eyes fixed on her face for the first time in many years. He felt small, powerless. He whispered softly, "Thank you, you saved my son, you saved my whole world." His voice cracked, something that never happened in meetings or speeches. The nanny stirred, her eyes opening slowly. She turned her head, weak but alert. The boy immediately leaned closer. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm safe because of you." Tears filled her eyes as she touched his cheek with her trembling hand. "That's all I wanted," she whispered back. The millionaire leaned forward, his voice unsteady. "You risked your life for him. I can never repay what you have done." She shook her head slightly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "I did not do it for thanks. He is my child too, maybe not by blood, but in my heart." Her words struck him deeply, more than any deal or contract ever could. Doctors warned that her recovery would take time. Her burns were painful, her lungs needed healing, yet the boy refused to leave her side. He slept in a chair beside her, holding her hand even as she slept. The millionaire watched them both, realizing that love and loyalty cannot be bought. They are earned, given freely by hearts like hers. The hospital staff whispered about her bravery. Reporters crowded outside, hungry for the story of the nanny who had risked her life in fire. But inside the quiet hospital room, the truth was simple. She was not thinking of fame. She was not thinking of rewards. She thought only of the child she had saved, and the promise she had kept. As the night grew long and quiet, the millionaire sat by the window. His thoughts heavy, he looked at his son asleep, his tiny hand still wrapped around the nanny's, and in that silence he realized something he had never seen before. All his wealth, all his success meant nothing without the love that had saved his child. It was a lesson he would never forget. Days passed slowly in the hospital. The nanny lay weak but alive, her arms and face wrapped in bandages. The boy never left her side. He refused to go home. He ate his meals sitting on the chair beside her bed, and he slept with his head resting against her arm. Whenever she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was his little face. Full of love and worry, it gave her strength to keep fighting. The millionaire visited every day. He brought doctors, nurses, and even private specialists. He told them, Do whatever it takes. Money is not important. Her life is important, but deep inside, he knew money could not buy what she had done. It could not buy courage. It could not buy the love that made her rush into the fire without thinking of herself. One evening, while she was resting, a doctor pulled the millionaire aside. His voice was serious. She is strong, but her body is tired. The smoke hurt her lungs badly. She will need weeks, maybe months, to heal. She should not go back to work soon. The millionaire nodded, but his thoughts were heavy. This woman had nearly died for his son, yet she asked for nothing. She had lived a life of sacrifice long before the fire. That night, as he sat by her bed, he began to ask questions. He wanted to know who she really was. He had always seen her as the nanny, kind and hardworking, but little else. Now he realized there was more to her story. At first she was shy to speak, but slowly her words came. She told him about her childhood, about growing up poor in a small village. She had many younger siblings, and when her father died, she became the one to take care of them. She left school early, working different jobs to feed her family. When she was finally offered the chance to work as a nanny in the city, she accepted, not for herself, but to send money home so her brothers and sisters could stay in school. Her eyes filled with tears as she remembered a night long ago when her own family's house had caught fire. She was just a child then, and she had watched helplessly as her youngest brother was trapped inside. The memory haunted her. She had promised herself that if she was ever faced with fire again, she would not run away. She would save whoever she could. That old wound had shaped her heart, making her brave in ways most people could not understand. The millionaire listened in silence. His chest grew tight as he realized the depth of her pain and the depth of her courage. He had lived his life surrounded by wealth, yet he had never carried such heavy responsibility. She had carried it all her life quietly, with no complaint. And then she had carried his son out of a burning house. Even when her own body was breaking, he looked at her with new eyes, not as an employee, not even as a nanny, but as someone extraordinary, someone whose strength was greater than his fortune. He was stunned. He had thought himself a powerful man. But sitting beside her, he felt humbled. The boy listened too, his little eyes wide. He wrapped his arms around her bandaged shoulder, whispering, "You're the bravest person I know," she smiled weakly, brushing his hair with her fingers. "I only did what my heart told me," she said softly. Reporters tried to push their way into the hospital, wanting pictures and interviews, but the millionaire refused. "Leave her in peace," he ordered. She did not do this for fame. And he was right. She did not want her face on newspapers. She wanted only to see the boy smile again, to know he was safe. But the millionaire could not stop thinking about her story. It shook him, it changed him. He saw how she had worked so hard for her family, how she had carried old wounds in silence, and yet still found the strength to risk her life for his son. He realized he had been blind for years, blind to the quiet hero who lived under his roof. One evening, after the boy had fallen asleep on the chair beside her, the millionaire leaned closer and spoke quietly. "I thought I had everything, money, success, power. But I see now I had nothing compared to you. You gave everything without asking for anything. I'm ashamed I never saw it before." His voice broke as he added, "You are not just his nanny, you are his angel." Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head, whispering, "I am only human. I did what anyone with love in their heart would do." But deep down, she knew not everyone would have made the same choice. Many would have frozen, many would have run away. But she had remembered her promise, and she had kept it. The millionaire sat in silence after that. But his heart was heavy with gratitude. He knew he had to do something more, not just say words, not just give thanks. He had to change her life the way she had changed his. And so, as the days turned into weeks while the nanny slowly healed, the millionaire made a decision that would stun her and everyone around. A decision born not of pity, but of respect, of honor, of love. Weeks passed, and the nanny grew stronger little by little. Her burns began to heal, though her arms and face still carried marks. The boy never left her side. His small chair became a permanent place by her bed. Sometimes he read to her. Sometimes he simply held her hand. For him, she was not just his nanny anymore. She was his hero, his shield, his second mother. The millionaire visited every day as well. At first he came out of guilt and gratitude. But soon he came out of something deeper. He felt respect, something he had not often given in his world of wealth. He watched how she smiled even through pain, how she comforted the boy when she herself was weak, and he wondered how someone with so little could give so much. When the doctors finally allowed her to leave the hospital, she thought she would return quietly to her small room in the mansion. She had never asked for more. She was content with her simple life, as long as the boy was safe. But what happened next stunned her, and stunned everyone who knew the story. On the morning of her discharge, the millionaire gathered the staff, the doctors, and even a few reporters who had begged to cover the moment. He stood tall, but his eyes were softer than ever. He held his son's hand, and together they walked to her. The boy let go of his father's hand and ran to her, hugging her tightly. "You're coming home," he whispered happily. The millionaire cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the room. "I built a house of stone and glass, and it is gone. But this woman," he pointed gently to the nanny, "she built something greater. She built love and safety for my son. She risked everything when money and walls could not protect him. For that I owe her more than I can ever repay." The room fell silent, everyone listening. The millionaire continued, "From this day, she is not just a nanny in my house, she is family. She will never worry about money again. She will never work in shadows again. Everything I have will be open to her, because without her, I would have nothing." The nanny's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I did not do this for reward, I only wanted him safe." The millionaire stepped closer, placing a hand over hers. "I know, that is why you deserve it. That is why you deserve everything. You gave your life for him. Now let me give you a life free of pain and fear." The boy beamed with joy. "Papa, she can stay with us forever, right?" His father nodded, smiling for the first time in many days. "Yes, forever. She is as much your family as I am." The staff clapped softly, some with tears in their eyes. They had seen her kindness every day, and now they saw her being honored for it. Reporters snapped pictures, but for once, the story was not about wealth or power. It was about courage, love, and sacrifice. In the days that followed, the millionaire kept his promise. He made sure her family in the village was cared for. He paid for her siblings' education. He even rebuilt a home for them, safe and strong. When she heard the news, she wept, not for herself, but for her brothers and sisters who would now have chances she never had. Yet through all this, she stayed humble. She still woke early to care for the boy, still told him bedtime stories, still held his hand when he was afraid. The only difference was that now, she did it not as an employee, but as part of the family. The boy often whispered to her, "I love you," and she would answer softly, "I love you too, always." The mansion was gone, but in its place something greater had been built. The millionaire had learned a lesson money could never teach, that true wealth is not in gold or glass, but in the hearts of people who give without asking. He had been stunned by her courage, but even more stunned by her humility. Years later, the boy would grow up, but he would never forget the night of the fire, and the arms that carried him through smoke and flame. He would tell the story again and again, and each time he would say proudly, "She saved me. She is the reason I am here." And the nanny, though scarred by the fire, carried those scars with quiet pride. For her, they were not marks of pain, but reminders of love, reminders that she had kept her promise. When people asked why she risked her life, she always gave the same answer: because love is stronger than fear, and no child should face the fire alone. The millionaire would often sit quietly, watching his son and the woman who had become more than family. He would think back to that terrible night and whisper to himself, "I was rich before, but I only became truly wealthy the day she walked through fire for my son." And so, what began as tragedy ended as a story of love and loyalty. A story that would live not just in newspapers, but in hearts, for when the flames tried to take everything, the nanny gave everything, and in return she gained a place no fire could ever destroy. The place of being loved forever.